Hello, it's Sonia here, The Pretty Stitch. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time joining me, I'm so happy to have you here. So today is Tuesday, and that means it's Tunisian Tuesday, where we either feature a Tunisian crochet stitch pattern or an actual Tunisian pattern of an object. And we are doing a stitch pattern today. And to do this, I'm going to use my J hook or 6mm hook. And as you can see, it's just a regular straight crochet hook. So if you do not have a Tunisian hook, you can still practice Tunisian crochet as long as you have just a plain straight crochet hook. And I've already gotten started on my swatch here. So to do this particular stitch pattern, you will need to just chain an even number. So I went ahead and I chained 12, and I've already worked row 1, which is our setup row. So I'm going to show a clip on how to get started on row 1. So we're going to get started on row 1. So this first row is our setup row. So in our second chain from our hook, I like to work in the back bump of the chain. So I'm just turning it over right there in the back bump. I'm going to insert my hook in there and pull up a loop. And if you've never done Tunisian crochet before, I do have a whole playlist that goes over the basics to get you started. And with Tunisian crochet, each row is worked in 2 parts. So the first part of the row is the forward pass, where you are putting your stitches on your hook like I'm doing right now. And then the second part is called the return pass, and that is where you take your stitches off, and each part equals 1 row. Okay, so there is our forward pass of row 1. So the amount of stitches that you chained, you should have the same amount on your hook. So I chained 14, so I have 14 loops on my hook. But if you chained a different amount, then obviously you would have a different amount of loops on your hook. So let's work on the return pass, where we're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 2 for the rest of the row. All right, so there is row 1. Okay, so we are back. So let's get ready to start row 2. And this is just worsted weight number 4 yarn that I have in my stash. So to do this stitch pattern, it's just a 2-row repeat. So we are going to work a Tunisian purl stitch. So yarn in front. We're going to skip the first vertical bar and work in the second one. And just work a purl stitch. Now, keep in mind, you do want to work a little bit more loosely with this particular one. It just makes things easier. So now we're going to work Tunisian purl in the one we skipped. In that vertical bar that we skipped, we're working Tunisian purl. And we're going to repeat across. So skip the next one, work Tunisian purl in the next stitch. And now we go back into the one we skipped. So you can see it's easier if you work a little bit more loosely so that you can get that bar that you skipped. Because if you work it tightly, then it's a lot trickier to find that vertical bar that was skipped. All right, we're almost to the end. We have 3 stitches left. You can see I'm using my fingernail to kind of just get that vertical bar. All right, so now we need to work in that stitch that looks like a chain. Oops, the yarn's splitting. So I like to work through that chain, pulling up a loop. So because I chained 12, I still will have 12 loops on my hook. So let's work the return pass. We're going to yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2 for the rest of the row. All right, so there we go. There is row 2. So let's begin row 3. Row 3, we are going to work Tunisian knit stitch. So that means you're working through all the way across. And if you're not familiar with Tunisian knit or Tunisian purl, I do have those stitches in my Tunisian crochet playlist to help you get started. So we're just doing Tunisian knit all the way across. And then we work in that last stitch that looks like a chain, pulling up a loop, And again, we have 12 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. So what you're going to do for this stitch pattern is you're going to be repeating rows 2 and 3 for however long you want your swatch, and then we will do our bind off row to finish it up. So I'm going to work a few more rows so you can see this stitch pattern, and I will meet you back. Alright, so I worked 13 rows and now we need to do the bind off row. So as you can see, this stitch pattern does lay relatively flat, which is nice. A lot of Tunisian crochet stitches do not lay flat, they like to curl. But because we have the purl stitches, that does help with that. Alright, so we are going to bind off, so that's just finishing off our work, and we're going to bind off in pattern. So we ended on a row 3, so now we're going to bind off in row 2. So we're going to skip our first vertical bar, work in the next in Tunisian purl, work that purl, and then we work that slip stitch. So it's a combination, now we go back in the one we skip, of Tunisian crochet and regular crochet, work the Tunisian purl. So we're just working in pattern. And again, I am keeping my hand a little bit relaxed because of the nature of this stitch. And we can't forget our last stitch, and there we go. So I think this stitch would work for a variety of projects. It does have a lot of nice texture to it. I think it would be great in a blanket, a hat, a sweater, a scarf, especially because you don't have to worry about it curling. And I did make some other swatches. So here is another one that I did using an H hook and worsted weight yarn, and I did 14 stitches for this one and 10 rows total for this one. And then here is another one, I also with worsted weight, but this stitch, or this one, I used an H hook or a 5mm hook, so you can see the difference with a smaller hook. And then one more. So this particular one I used an H hook, and this is DK weight yarn. So you can just see the difference in the different weights of yarn and sizes of hooks for this particular stitch pattern. And I did bind off a little bit different for this one, but I prefer this bind off. This is when I was playing around with the stitch. But I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.